This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And tonight we give you one of our favorite episodes of the year, which is when we're joined by Jon Meoli of the Baltimore Banner to break down his new top 10 list over at Baseball America for the Orioles farm system. Of course, we're eventually going to have a full top 30 from Jon later this offseason, but the top 10 dropped later this week, and we're going to get his thoughts about that and more on tonight's episode. But first, a quick note here as we gear up for the holidays. Patreon is running a special right now where you can send gift memberships to the Orioles fan in your life. Be sure to send them a $3, $5, or $10 membership. You can do a month-to-month membership, a custom month range on the membership, or do a full year and save 15% off the whole cost. Plus, you get to write them a note to go along with the membership, a limit of 140 characters. And if you ask politely, I might just write the note for you. So be sure to check that out over at patreon.com today and sign up a friend or a family member to become a member of our community. And now we'll get into the topic of tonight's episode. And for that, we are joined by writer over at the Baltimore Banner, longtime reporter covering the Orioles. He's also the co-host of the Banner Baseball Show alongside Paul Mancano. He is Jon Meoli. Jon, great to have you back.
Yeah, look at us, a bunch of podcasters. Good to be back, though. Has anyone caught up to me yet?
Now, you're still a couple episodes ahead of Connor Newcomb, and Andy Koska is trailing you guys by a good bit.
Good, as it should be. No, Connor's great. It's an honor. I'll say that.
That's good. I'm glad that this still feels like home, even though you've got your own show now.
Yeah, it is. It's different. It's different. Like when you got to do it. I'm sure you guys, it's easier in the season when there's, 5 games a night times 6 times 30 weeks, but it's a different animal than just writing. Writing, you just think of it and you sit down and you do it, and this you gotta sound like a real person.
You sound real to me.
This is not AI. Not yet.
Not yet.
Before we get into the top 10, we want to talk about some of what's going on in the Orioles offseason, including the recent signing of Ryan Helsley to be their closer. What are your thoughts on that move?
I thought it was a pretty good move. The Orioles have been interested in Ryan Helsley for a while. So, I think that's the type, when we're looking at what the Orioles are going to do to put themselves over the top and push themselves that little bit in free agency or in a trade, it's somebody they wanted for a while. They said the same about Taylor Ward, honestly. And I don't know that to be true the way that I know Ryan Helsley to be true, but I believe it. I think there might be 1 or 2 or 3 relievers who you can say are better than him for sure. This offseason, maybe some of them have already gotten more money, and Devin Williams and Edwin Diaz will get more money. And I think Raisel Iglesias got more money for 1 year for the team he was already on. But the Orioles didn't really skimp on this. I think that's what's kind of stuck out to me. This is a real solution to a problem that was also real. He is really, an impactful closer. He's done it before. I think there's going to be a lot of value to just kind of giving him that 9th inning and not worrying about it, because you're going to have a lot of other unsettled parts in that bullpen, even if they do make more additions. So I think as far as, the first free agency salvo, with apologies to Leody Taveras, like this is what you would expect them to do. But not in the way we would have said that like last offseason. I think it was what you would expect them to do 2 years ago when they signed Craig Kimbrell around this time, because they only needed a closer for 1 year and they wanted to roll the dice and get lucky with somebody who might not have it anymore. I don't think anybody, even though he didn't finish terribly well with the Mets, can say that about Ryan Helsley.
Yeah, it's interesting. Felix Bautista, I mean, it's not any guarantee that he ever is effective in the major leagues again, unfortunately. Hopefully he is, but yeah, it's nice of you to have your brother-in-law chime in in the comment section here, Timothy Park.
Yeah, yes, I appreciate that comment. I was noticing it, and I think on Felix Batista, like you can't really count on. You would love to see him out there again, but he was only. I mean, I think he got up to like maybe 90% of himself before he got back as it is. So not only do you have to get that extra 10% back, you have to recover from shoulder surgery, which is a lot harder to do than Tommy John in terms of coming back strong. So, I understand why it's a 1-year deal or 2-year deal with an opt out. You know, I don't think, and I think this kind of went with what I thought with Tyler O'Neill last year is that, if Tyler O'Neill has a year, I was thinking this time last year, if he had a year that was good enough to opt out, congratulations to him, and the Orioles can just go get another Tyler O'Neill, which they kind of did anyways, even though Tyler was here.
Yeah, but I do like the signing a lot. I thought he was obviously, when going into the offseason, we didn't know Edwin Diaz was going to be this available.
Yeah.
But other than Devin Williams, I thought he was right there with Robert Suarez, their next best closer option. And honestly, yeah, if he's great and he opts out, you can qualify or offer him the qualifying offer and he can deny it. And you could potentially get a draft pick, or he could say, hey, that's $22 million. I'll take that for one more year. And it's a good thing if he has to opt out, because that means he had a very good season.
Yeah. And I think even on that front, he talked a little bit about it yesterday, but he chose to come here to be for this role. He could have started if he wanted to elsewhere. He could have obviously, closed also elsewhere too, I imagine, but it just seems like a good setup. The fastball shape issues that kind of plagued him seems like something the Orioles can obviously help with. And it's one of those, like, set it and forget it type deals where if you have a closer who is like this, there's really no such thing as a bad closer. If you're bad at closing, you don't get to close for very much longer. We saw that with Craig Kimbrell a couple of times. So I think that as long as he is, chugging along, he has that mentality, and it's kind of a box checked for me when I think about the signing.
Yeah, I just realized we never even talked about the signing since it happened. So I just I wanted Robert Suarez. That was my top choice, but I'm coming around the Helsley thing. I think I just look at, you're talking about a reliever, and I think only like Tyler Rogers had a higher stuff plus like qualified relievers last year. I think just a 1-inning reliever, I'm just going to bet on that pure stuff that he has. And the fact that like the Orioles brought back Drew French and Plasmeyer and Ryan Klimek, and like they brought back everybody. I'm going to trust that group that has done their due diligence. As I know they've come out and talked about, they've already got a plan. I'm going to trust that plan and say, like, I like this deal more and more. Yeah, the 1 year, if it's just one really solid year, then fantastic. We'll talk about next year's closer next year, but right now, potentially this was go back a couple weeks ago, the mailbag episode we did. The closer was the position that I said I was most intrigued to see how they were going to fill this, because I think Felix Bautista pitches a total of 0 innings next year, and they got their guy. So yeah, I'm willing to bet on that. What was it, like, was it 140 something stuff plus slider? And yeah, you've got the velo there. It just seems like everything is there, and you're only talking about 1 year removed of him being a pretty elite closer. So it's not like a massive reclamation project here.
No, it wasn't long ago where we were talking about, could the Orioles make a big trade and get Ryan Helsley at the trade deadline?
Just to go back to something you wrote recently in the banner about the Orioles outfield situation, even after they acquired Taylor Ward, as you pointed out, it still feels like their outfield picture is very unsettled. How do you think they're going to address that throughout the rest of the offseason, given Colton Cowser's relative inexperience in center field and some of the question marks on the corners?
There's not an easy solution, especially given what they've already done. They've kind of locked down left field, for lack of a better word, and I think if you go on like roster resource right now, like they have Tyler O'Neill on the bench, and that's probably not what they're envisioning right now. You want Tyler O'Neill to be in there every day if you have Tyler O'Neill. So I don't know what they do. I mean, there's the big free agents out there. Everybody knows about Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger. It would make the Orioles a little more left-handed. It also wouldn't matter because they're good, and they're not really like super splitty type guys, that feels like a thing that they are probably in the mix for. I'm not saying that they will get anything like that done. That would create some problems in terms of having as many guys you want to get in there as they do, but it would also free up some ability for them to do other things and move players to fill other needs. It just doesn't feel like, this is all happening because, they traded for Taylor Ward. Who did they trade for Taylor Ward? Grayson Rodriguez. What is one of the main reasons that you trade Grayson Rodriguez for an outfielder who's only going to help you in 2026? Because this team isn't really in a position to be wondering what they have in someone and be like, well, maybe we'll get 70 innings from Grayson Rodriguez. Maybe we'll get 0. Maybe we'll get 30. They weren't really in a position to be able to carry that uncertainty. So I don't know how they're going to carry the uncertainty that they are as it's presently constructing the outfield. There's Tyler O'Neill is, the Orioles got the full Tyler O'Neill experience last year. They want the good end of it for where he plays 130 games and hits 30 home runs, but they got the one that wasn't as good. Dylan Beavers had a great debut, and we'll see what happens after this. Colton Cowser spent a lot of time hurt. It just doesn't feel like they could go into this season thinking that this is a settled and reliable group overall, which I don't think is how they want to be viewing any part of this roster.
Yeah, between Taylor Ward combined with Tyler O'Neill plus tendering Ryan Mountcastle a contract, and you already have KB Mayo and Samuel Basayo, and a potential addition of, we're linked with Kyle Schwarber, Pete Alonso at certain points in the offseason. Don't know how likely those are, but it feels like there's definitely some unsettled business when it comes to the position player side.
Yeah, and I think, tendering Ryan Mountcastle a contract, I was always in favor of doing that. I just think Ryan Mountcastle is, I don't want to say better than he is, but just I'm not as down on Ryan Mountcastle as one would be having, given what the production has been. It just seems like it's a decision you say, we'll figure it out when we have to. There's enough moving pieces and there's enough uncertainty as to who's going to be available and when, that the worst thing that can happen is that you get rid of someone that you might need and then you turn out to need them. The Orioles have been in that situation a few times in the last couple of years, and it's not one that they probably want to replicate.
We know that for a lot of fans, the thing that is going to define this offseason is what they do or don't do to address the rotation. Do you think that they're going to land atop the rotation arm at some point? And if so, is that going to be it? Or do you think that they're going to seek upgrades for the lower part of the starting five?
I would say I think the best version of this offseason for the Orioles as they're laying it out now is that they do both. Now, it's probably going to be somebody that you're quibbling with where he stacks up among and between Kyle Bradish and Trevor Rogers rather than somebody who is very, very clearly above them. There's just not as many guys who are clearly above those guys as there are who are in that top half of the rotation mix. But I can't sit here, having heard what Mike Elias has said, and I harp on this all the time, and I know I shouldn't, but it just struck me so strange that somebody who has operated this team without really any consideration of what the outside world thinks of what he's doing, wants the Orioles to be considered an AL East favorite or contender entering spring training. They were well under 500 and very much in last place in the division last season. They can't achieve that and make people around the game in the media think that this is a team that's going to be 20 wins better and compete in a division that sent 2 teams to the World Series in the last 2 years if they make marginal additions and don't make big splashes. Ryan Helsley is a nice splash. A big time starter would be the type of splash that will have people looking at this team's roster at the end of January and saying, all right, the Orioles did some stuff. Maybe this team can do it. If that's the standard, then they have to go out and do that. I also think that they could find some decent value in the mid to lower tier starters and fill out the rotation that way. I'm not saying or endorsing anything that happened last year, but I think that, a Sugano type or, the best version of Charlie Morton, fits well in a rotation where other guys are healthy and pitching well. If you're relying on those guys, you're in trouble. But if you just have them and you get to kind of put them in low stakes situations and have them as depth, that's very important to have, and it usually goes better than relying on them. So I think they do both, but I truly can't see a world where, or I don't want to see a world where they don't add somebody to the top few spots in the rotation, because that will be optically, practically, baseball wise, optically, spiritually, like a very, very bad thing for the Baltimore Orioles.
It really does feel like the 2025 season was a wake-up call to everybody, not just fans, but ownership, the new ownership group. I feel like Elias and company, it just feels different this offseason, the way they're talking.
It does. And I've said this to Paul, and like, you can't, I just feel very strongly that like that is true. Everyone I've talked to has made some comment to that extent, like, this is not going to happen. This is not going to go the same way it did. It's just, I feel weird about how strongly I believe it, because I honestly like kind of feel like a mark, but I don't know that I am. I just feel like I'm internalizing like what I know and what I understand, and I'm trying to communicate it. But it's also tricky because I thought they were going to sign one of the top pitchers last year. I think they did too. Honestly, I think they did too. I think they thought they were going to be able to do it. And it turns out you can have all the money in the world and all the technology and the best free agent pitch decks. And if New York comes calling, if LA comes calling, somebody wants to go home, somebody wants to live in a different place, they're not going to come here. Like, that's just how it went. And I think they learned their lesson, and I think they're just going to have to, they're going to have to solve that problem with more money and make it so that somebody can't say no. And maybe they do that. Maybe they do. But everything they've done in terms of trading Grayson Rodriguez for Taylor Ward feels like we're doing things differently. Signing Ryan Helsley, who's one of the top relievers on the market, feels different. And now is the time to see whether they can go all the way on that. But
they are so cheap, as you see with the Jeff Arnold decision.
yeah. I mean, Jeff's my guy. I feel
that really was unfortunate.
Don't think that should have happened, obviously. And someone is going to get a very, very good broadcaster who's going to be doing it for a very long time in their market, and that market should be Baltimore. And that is my thought on that.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Completely agree there. And we'll go over now to the top 10 list. And speaking of pitching, we did see something interesting inside of your top 10 this year. 4 pitchers ranked inside the top 10, including Trey Gibson at number 3. And with Samuel Basayo and Dylan Beavers probably graduating early in the year, not far off from being the number 1 prospect in the system. How big of a shift is this in your mind with how the farm system has evolved? And does it really speak to how the talent in the system has shifted, at least at the very top?
It does. It really does. There's a couple factors that would go into that. The 2023 draft, they traded Jackson Baumeister, Matt Horvath, Matthew Etzel. Those guys would be probably in this mix if they didn't get traded. The 2024 draft, the top of it is not represented in the top 10, but Nate George is. So you have a lot more players who are in that stage of their career, the second and third year in pro ball, arrow up guys who have performed and are improving before people's eyes, and that's how you make that push into the upper reaches of this list. I think Trey Gibson's probably the greatest example of that by virtue of him being I can truly say that I didn't enter this process. I think that Trey Gibson, Michael Ferret, Luis De Leon, I guess Esteban Mejia, like I knew those were going to be the top handful of pitchers. I don't think I saw a world where Trey Gibson was as clearly so many people's number one pitcher in this organization as ended up happening. That goes for scouts, that goes for people inside the organization, outside. He just spent the year dominating. People saw it with their own eyes. They went back to their hotel rooms or to their houses, and they opened up TrackMan, and they saw the stats, and they said, wow, this is real. This guy's striking out 40% of the guys he's facing. He's striking out 30-some% of the guys he's facing. He is commanding a huge arsenal all around the strike zone. He's missing bats. He's doing all these things. And I think the shift kind of represents, it's definitely a shift towards pitching. I think that's clear. And I think that's necessary, honestly, for all the success that this organization has had. They need to have pitchers get to the big leagues and pitch for the Baltimore Orioles and pitch well. And with very limited caveats, that hasn't really happened.
Yeah, that's what I love most about this top 10 list is that not just that there's 4 pitchers in the top 10, but also you're talking about an undrafted free agent signing who, when he went to the Cape Cod League after not pitching that final year at Liberty, like he walked everybody and then some more. And the Orioles still brought him in, and now he's potentially going to be the top prospect in the system. But then you got a $30,000 international arm in Luis De Leon, a 14th round JUCO pick in Michael Ferret, and Esteban Mejia, $150K, but it's not a super deep cut find like De Leon, but still another international signee who the Orioles scouted, signed, and are developing. But with Gibson in particular, I think you had a question in your Baseball America chat about this. When he got to AAA, the baseball card stats didn't look great, got hit around a little bit, and you addressed that a little bit why. But I'm curious about all these guys like Gibson, and he was like 2 innings away from his career high for innings in a season when he got the bump to AAA. So pushing through that. But him, Levi Wells, kind of in that same situation. How much in your discussion with players, scouts, contacts, like how much does being forced to switch to the MLB ball? And I know Baseball America did all that research last year about how the AAA strike zone was just incredibly, like historically tight. How much do all those other factors go into how impactful are those with these guys? Like, yeah, some guys are going to get to AAA and they're going to hit that wall and they're just not going to find any success. But how much of those, like some of the struggles we saw them have, how much of that can we dismiss from some of those other factors?
I think most of it is attributable to one or more of those things. I think the workload stuff it feels obvious, but there's just a clear amount of innings that young pitchers who are, growing their workloads and early in their professional careers, there's just a certain amount of innings that after a while you see a clear decline. I think that occurred with Trey Gibson. He was getting up there in innings. He basically didn't pitch for, that last season at Liberty. So you're talking about needing to build up there. I think the ball is a huge issue for Trey issue period. For Trey Gibson, there was some fastball movement stuff that players can and do iron out over time. Once they get used to the ball, it's, they figure out a way to get back to the optimal movement profile that they had at other levels. It just takes a bit of time. He didn't really have that time to do that. I think conversely, it made his 2-seam work a little better, but the 4-seam got hit a bit, and there were just some, you can deal with this one of two ways. One of the true issues with the strike zone, with the ball, with the general difference is that guys get into a groove of establishing identity and having, consistent attack plans and approaches to what they're doing on the mound every 5th day, 6th day. And then things start going in a different direction when they go to a new level and the ball's not doing what they want it to do. And they're making pitches that they think should be good pitches and they get hit. And then they just start doing stuff that's completely different and against those tendencies and against what got them there. And that, I think, happened with Trey Gibson as well. And I make it a point now, every time I do these calls to try to find from people in the organization what the AAA adjustment was like, because there's usually one or two things that you can say point to pretty clearly that will tell you what's going on now. These are all things, they sent him home with big league baseballs to throw with. He's going to get used to this. He's going to have that. That's what he's going to use for probably the rest of his life. So he will get used to it. But I think more often than not, yes, you are right. There are pitchers who get to AAA and they cannot. That's as far as they're meant to go. I don't think having a bucket of above average pitches and throwing a fastball in like the mid 90s is that type of guy. So in that context, I think you can attribute it mostly to just end of season, huge transition, and you kind of see what happens from there.
I mean, it's exactly what we saw with Braden Young in 2024. And then he came back this year and got his profile, like you said, back from 2024 with the Major League ball in AAA. And then, of course, there's another adjustment period when you do make the major leagues. But
yeah. And I think it's just kind of a baked in thing now. The same way that we look at every year. Also, there's calls and ask about somebody with Delmarva, and they're like, oh, if Aberdeen still existed as a short season, that's where he would have been, and he would have been fine. But instead, you're talking about somebody who just got completely overwhelmed at low A. So it's when I say it sounds like excuse making or I guess it kind of is, but I think that's just kind of how I mentally operate, where if there's a reason, cool, now I know the reason, and you can kind of accept it from there.
You mean you just don't draft first round pitchers and immediately plug them into the major leagues and they're amazing pitchers? Takes time. I
was actually thinking, though, I don't want to interrupt, but if the Orioles end up wouldn't the funniest thing, if we're talking about 2026 is the year they do everything different, if they just win the lottery and take a pitcher with the first overall pick and just jetpack him to the big leagues, that would be funny. That would be kind of funny.
They're like, we already have our rock. We're not going with this one.
Yeah.
To switch gears though and look at the top of your list there with Samuel Basallo, we saw the major league debut. What's the vibe going into 2026 with Basallo and the bat? We know that the defense, I feel like most people right now, regardless of where he ends up defensively, the bat should shine. And we know there's still work to be done there. Young backstop, getting that confidence up, being able to call a major league game, continuing to, because I feel like last year the plan was for him not to catch as much as he did. And then obviously he was kind of forced into that a little bit more, but where is he at going into 2026 with the bat?
I think in a pretty good place. One thing that somebody mentioned that I think I didn't really think about in the moment, but is probably true, that everyone on this Zoom, everyone with the Orioles, everyone following this team even a little bit, knew that there was only so many at-bats that Samuel Basallo could get last year before he was just going to mysteriously be out of the lineup a lot of times. It was very clear that he was only going to get a certain amount of at-bats. I think he put a little pressure on himself to do as well in those 100 and whatever at-bats that he was going to get, which of course he is. This is somebody who's put pressure on himself for a very, very long time to be a really, really good hitter. And I think he can. I think you saw enough for that to be the case. Honestly, I think that if the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season goes well for him, he's going to win the Rookie of the Year. If it's a struggle and it takes time for him to figure out the big leagues and find what he really wants to be doing, it will not be a quick ascent. But I think that if it starts going well, he's going to ride that wave in a really meaningful way. And I think that's most young players. We've seen that any number of times in any number of scenarios with these Orioles. But I think him specifically, that if this starts well and he gets off to a good start, it's going to be a really, really good season for him.
And what a luxury to have, right? You don't have to count on him, hopefully, going into this season where he's probably going to be in the bottom of the order to start off. But like you said, if he gets that snowball rolling downhill early, it could be like a Junior Caminero type season.
Yeah, and he's going to have pressure on himself from himself, no matter what. But I think that the best functioning version of this team will let him hit, like you said, in the bottom third of the lineup, and just go out there and take good at bats. Guys are going to think they can exhale because there's going to be big boppers in front of him who they had to get through, and then they're just going to find that there's another one, and we've seen what can happen when he locks in and gets his pitch. He crushes it. He's been doing that for years, so I'm pretty fascinated to see. Again, it's such a small sample in the big leagues that people kind of see what he did and they said, oh yeah, I see it. But like, I think it's pretty much a consensus that we're talking about somebody who's going to hit for a long time in the big leagues.
All right, going back to a pitcher, even before his performance in the Arizona Fall League, did you have a sense that Luis De Leon, his stock was rising? Do you think he's someone the Orioles are getting a lot of calls about this offseason on the trade front?
I would imagine so. I'm sure at the same time when you guys kind of would have noticed in the season that he was, just dominating, finishing up that stretch in Aberdeen. I started asking around, and it seemed like he was really kind of locked in. He didn't, sometimes when guys don't want to be in a place anymore, they'll really take it to the next level to move up, and that seems like it's what's happened. They had a meeting, and basically the only issue was that he wasn't locating his fastball optimally to righties, and then he started doing that, and everything else played up a little bit. I think that my disconnect with him has always been that, like, there's some kind, even though the stuff is really good and the stats have been basically really good since he came stateside and got to pro ball, they didn't feel connected to me. He's, sometimes everyone has these guys, like, when I say everyone, I'm not a scout. Scouts have them. I also have them. I'm not a scout, but like, I've never seen Luis De Leon be like awesome. I know that he has been awesome a lot of times because I can pull up his page on any number of websites and see how good his games are, and I've just never seen him like pitch that well. And I think that over the course of time, to get past that, you kind of have to see, well, what does he do? What does it look like when it goes well? And he really seems like somebody who is putting it together. And I say all that because it feels like he's got the baseline of like a really good starting pitcher, the ground ball rates, the stuff that you really hope can scale, and like he's still learning how to use his stuff. He's still developing like what's a really good arsenal. The floor will be set by our big league hitters going to pound his stuff into the ground if he throws it in the zone. And the answer seems like it's maybe. But there's just so much upside if as he continues to climb the ladder and kind of develop his sense of what he wants to do and what he can do well. I think it's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating thing. I don't know that there's anyone else like him in the system from that perspective.
It's actually interesting that Lance Bresnowski had written him up in his Substack this morning, and he was comparing him to Blake Snell, where he just refuses to be beat by his fastball and throws like a bunch of breaking balls, change up sliders, and that's why he didn't give up a home run this year, but that's why his walks were up. So it's interesting guy to follow.
Yeah, and I think I think that's absolutely true. And I think on a lot of the times I've seen him, or like the times when those pitches weren't really working, so it's just a bunch of stuff that's like bouncing in the dirt in front of the plate and like missing. And that's not a fun time to see that. But it's interesting you say that. I mean, outside the organization, people mention Framber Valdez about him just because of the left-handedness, obviously, but I think he could fit 2 Luis De Leons inside Framber, but he's still growing. He'll maybe grow a little bit, but it's the ground ball stuff. And what makes Framber Valdez really good is that even if he doesn't have it, guys are just going to pound the ball into the ground. He's going to get outs. He's going to give you 5, 6 because guys are going to put the ball in play, and it's not going to be, he's going to get outs on the ground, and that's an intriguing thing for an Orioles team that's going to have a really good infield for a long time to say, hey, this guy could maybe scale into something like that. And that's what feels unique to me. He can miss bats. A lot of these guys can miss bats, but that feels like a skill that might be more scalable than at this stage than you can say that like strikeouts are.
Sounds like we need to sign a mentor for LDL.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I think I've thought about that too. It's like, maybe last year they would say like, we don't need to sign Framber Valdez. We have Luis De Leon coming soon, but like maybe now they'll just say, screw it. Let's get the guy anyways. I don't know. That's what makes me feel like a mark, like I said.
So all prospect lists come with some inherent level of risk, but is there a player or maybe a group of players that when you look at this top 10 that feel particularly risky?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't know what to do with Esteban Mejia, if we're being perfectly honest. Someone from Baseball America saw him pitch in the FCL, saw the stuff that everyone else down there got to see. I mean, you couldn't be in Florida. I think he was starting every Tuesday. You couldn't be in Florida on a Tuesday afternoon and seeing what Esteban Mejia was doing and not think like, wow, this is really, really good. It's massive stuff. It's overwhelming. And, he obviously shot up a lot of lists and I didn't really know what to do with that. Because it's so far away. It's so far away. It's hard to compare apples and like we're literally talking about apples and oranges. We're talking about people who have gotten to AAA, who have 2 full seasons of pitching in pro ball under their belts, who are older, who are closer to the big leagues, who have demonstrated that there's really, reasons to feel good about it. All you have to do is have eyes to see Esteban Mejia and be like, yeah, there's a reason to feel good about this person. But I just kept thinking that this time last year, Keeler Morphe had jumped onto the scene in the same way, and he was ranked in the teens, and he's probably like a foot shorter than Esteban Mejia. So like, there's a little more of a, you've seen what Esteban Mejia does before. You can tell what it looks like. Guys who are like that. Somebody mentioned Miguel Castro, which is not like the upside that you're thinking about, but like that's what it kind of looked like to a scout who saw him as a teenager. But Keeler Morphe also did not have a good season at all. And to go from like the teens to falling down significantly is serious. But if you put somebody in the top 10 and they have that kind of year, which I don't think Esteban Mejia will, it's just something that's in the back of your mind. And so that was something I didn't really know what to do with, honestly. I think he's in an appropriate place. The way that BA has always done it is you kind of give a guy a grade, and whatever the risk is, you kind of, subtract that from the grade, and that's how you order out the list. They're being much more transparent about that this year. So I think that Esteban Mejia might have the highest grade of any pitcher in the organization, and also has the highest level of risk for good reason, because he's a teenager who hasn't pitched a full professional season. And I think that's a reasonable place to have landed on that.
I mean, we're all new to the here in Baltimore scene. We're all new to the international prospect. Real quickly on Keeler Morphe, was like in your discussion with people about him, did anyone see that hard of a fall that quickly coming?
No one did. And nobody's like, I don't think anybody says it's a complete write-off, but it just did not go well. There's injury involved. There's the pressure of expectations. There's something that happens to a lot of people, which is like, it's hard to just be a professional baseball player and up for your life and do all these things that these guys have to do. I don't think anybody saw that coming though, but it was just living so clearly in my mind. I from the second I saw it all happening, I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, we talked to Mike Ashman just last night, and Zach brought up this point this morning that he hoped a lot of people remember from that interview when Micah said the difference between, one of the things adjusting to pro ball that he felt like really stuck with him was how cutthroat it is. So I can only imagine what it's like for these 17, 18-year-old international prospects that are now getting stateside and having to realize what happens when you're not on top of your game. But to switch to a totally different type of prospect here, Enrique Bradfield Jr. We got to talk about him and his game. A lot gets made about the offense. A lot of discussion, I'll say, about the offense. Everybody knows what the defense and speed is like. I take very little stock in his AAA numbers last season because it was 60 plate appearances after multiple IL stints. He goes to the Arizona Fall League, plays every day, center field, leadoff spots. We saw the new stance, and I think they talked about on the broadcast how that stance, an AFL thing. I don't know if we're going to see that or not when 2026 rolls around, but help him pick up spin, help him get the bat to the zone a little bit quicker. It's the AFL. It's practice ground. We saw him impact the baseball a little bit more in the fall, but then when I was watching, like especially in the second half of the AFL season, it was just seemed like way more bunting, like a higher emphasis on that. From the organization's view, is this the hope with Bradfield that like he's eventually going to be the everyday center fielder who plays the elite defense? And it's just that lean into that bunting, that slash it, just get it over the second baseman's head, and then just let all hell break loose on the base paths that we've seen throughout his career in the minor leagues. Is that kind of the hope with him at this point?
Yeah, I think so. And this was a really tricky one because I think, you mentioned AAA stuff, and in AA, he basically had he had a pretty good season around those injuries, and he continues to do what they're asking him to do, which is maintain your, ability to control the strike zone and stop and hit the ball on the ground less, because it's hard to, even with your speed, it's hard to turn that into hits all the time when you're putting the ball on the ground. So like he needs to do those types of things to get on base, to be able to deliver the value that his speed suggests that he will. That's, hitting line drives over the infielders and getting on and maybe stretch them into a double or stealing and turning into a double anyways. The bunting stuff is something that he's focused a lot about. It's hard to like execute that in a game often because you're playing the same team for a week at a time. Like after you bunt once, the third baseman is just going to be standing on top of you. Like that's just how it's going to go. But also those are your opportunities to get better at the rest of your offensive game. So you can't just have somebody, I'm sure there's quotas and I'm sure there's things they want him to be doing, bunting wise, but it's just a tool in the toolbox at this point. To answer your question, like they envision Enrique Bradfield having a lot of value for the Baltimore Orioles. I believe that to be as, kind of an everyday player, but you have to hit. I think they know what the value of the defense is going to be. They know that the value of the base running, but you also have to get on base. And like, you can walk at a good clip in the minors. We've seen guys who impact the ball significantly harder than him who walk in the minors. And then you get to the big leagues and guys are attacking you in the strike zone and attacking you at the edges, and you're not walking because they're not balls. Like this isn't bad. These aren't bad pitchers making bad pitches. They're good big league pitchers, and they're getting guys out in the strike zone. So if he can't, whether it's bunt his way on, whether it's, hit line drives over the infield, then the base running value goes away. But the Orioles I think he is higher in this group than where I have him ranked. I don't think that reflects my own personal. I don't think that makes me like a Enrique Bradfield skeptic. It's just a different profile to rank than any other. And I think there shouldn't be a distinction, but it feels like to me there is between like ranking prospects for public consumption and like baseball, like value to a baseball team. And I think Enrique Bradfield, his profile is one that does a lot better looking at it through the lens of value to a baseball team than value on a prospect list, which again should not be a different thing, but I believe is.
Yeah, he's a hot button topic, especially in our Discord, because there's people that just do not believe in the bat whatsoever, but there's other things than strictly just hitting for power. So we'll have to see how it all works out in the end.
Yeah. I mean, there was a year that and it was like a 700 OPS, but like there was a year that like Miles Straw was like a 3-win player with a 700, like an empty 700 OPS. Is Enrique Bradfield Jr. ever going to have a 700 OPS in the big leagues for a full season? I don't know. Maybe that's basically, would that be valuable if he did that? Is it valuable if it's a 650 OPS and like a 2-win player? Probably, but you need to have you need to have the rest of the players around him be such impactful hitters that it doesn't really matter. And I think that's where, if we're sitting here having this conversation last year, even though the Orioles kind of fell apart down the stretch, you could probably feel a little bit better about that being the case than after 2025, when Gunnar Henderson loses his thump and Jackson Holiday is up and down and Colton Cowser has the year he has, Natalie Rushman has the year he has, and Jordan Westberg's barely in there. Like in a functional best case scenario Orioles lineup, there's absolutely place for Enrique Bradfield Jr. I'm just not sure that that is something that is as easily counted on as it has been in years past.
Personally, I think he's going to be incredibly valuable, especially while he's pre-arb and has options. After that, it's a question, but
Yeah. And how much is he going to make in arbitration? Like, say this goes incredibly well, and he hits an empty 270 and steals 40 bases and enters arbitration with 9 home runs to his name. He's never going to make any money. Like, that will be valuable to the Orioles too.
I mean, we saw how long they held on to Jorge Mateo, so
yeah, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole nother conversation.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Nick, did you want to do the Nate George side of the outfield equation?
Yeah. I mean, with George, I know a lot seems to have been made. I think this all stemmed from an Eric Longenhagen chat question about, there's just a lot of the opposite field shots and he's not really seeing the power. And like, there's some skepticism there now starting to creep in. But I feel like with Nate George, is it fair to assume that, first of all, like this kid plays like just out of his mind every single play? Is it fair to assume that like he's a teenager? We're going to see him over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, kind of slow the game down a little bit and start to make more impact and continue to bulk up as he builds up physically. And we see 2 years from now, could we be talking about a completely like evolved form of Nate George that looks quite different from the Nate George we saw last year?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the stuff that he does well now is a good baseline. I think that the types of things we're talking about, pulling the ball in the air, is like a pro ball trait. That's a pro ball skill. That's a big league skill. That's something you grow into over time and you develop over time, and the best players do it. And the players who aren't the best players want to do it. So, there's a world where that's, I haven't spoken myself to Nate George. I haven't, outside of talking to people about this, that's my extent of my Nate George knowledge, but like that might not be a skill that he was ever working on. That might not be something that he has been trying to do. I think there's going to be a time when the Orioles need to figure out, is that something you want to do? Is that something that you can do? Is that something you should do? What do we have to do to get you physically able to do that and want to do that? But that feels like a later problem than a now problem. That feels to me like an observation now. And also not one that I don't know. Like, I don't want to say who cares, but like, I don't know that a lot of people are watching somebody at this stage in their career and trying to, and really focusing on that, other than people are obviously, but I think it just feels like something that if he plays all year in Frederick, or most of the year in Frederick, and there's not a lot of power, like true power, like he'll gap some doubles and get triples just by being fast. But like if there's not like real thump and that stuff isn't happening, and then he goes to Bowie and the same things are not happening, then you can talk about that. But for somebody who's just basically going out there and like trying to athlete people to death as a late round pick, trying to make his impression at pro ball, who has probably never been told anything other than like hit the ball the other way his entire life, like that feels natural to me in a way that the opposite does not. I doubt he's had many people being like, "You just got to pull the ball over the fence, buddy." Like that's great. That's what he's going to hear eventually, believe me. But like, I don't know that it's going to be. It's been a huge part of his repertoire to this point.
If he comes out in 2026 and starts pulling the ball for power, he's got to change his name to Nate Tuna, the next Mike Trout.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and like it's quite possible. I mean, when Jackson Holiday was that age, he was still learning to pull the ball for power too. I was there one day, like watching him do that in Fredericksburg for Delmarva. He was trying to figure out how to do what Nate George needs to try to do. Like, it is a learned skill. And I think that learning is probably underway. And I don't think the lack of it manifesting in games is the biggest deal at this point. If it's happening when he's in the high minors, yeah, that'll be a real thing though.
Yeah, I think it's very much nitpicking when a guy breaks out in such a way at such a young age. I mean, he's got so much development to go. But let's go to a more established guy that was brought into the organization through the draft last year, Ike Irish. It's so hard to make any conclusions based on what guys do immediately following the draft when they first enter professional ball with that first month that they get. But what do you think is his future? Is he going to be the perennial right fielder that mashes the ball, or are they going to try to play him a catcher?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're pretty committed to trying him at catcher. Now, I spoke to some people who, having watched the Orioles kind of do this with Ethan Anderson, where some days he's catching, some days he's at first, some days he's DHing. For a while, honestly, truly now, 3 full years into Samuel Basayo's career, I still talk to scouts, but I haven't really seen him catch that much because for the first month of every season, he's just DHing and playing first base, and then he's catching a couple times a week. Like, you don't really see these guys catch that much, and that's not to say that they're not working on it and doing everything they can to get better, but it's really hard to get better at catching without catching games regularly. It's also really hard to hold up if you are catching games regularly. So I think there's a real tightrope they have to walk, and how much he catches, and him being somebody who you want in there every day, and you can't have him catch every day. But I think they're going to try that. It seems like they're pretty confident he's going to hit. He mentioned himself when he came to Camden Yards after the season was over, he put the ball on the ground too much in that Delmarva stint, and I think that's probably correctable. But I can't think of anyone else who's going to benefit more from not having to go to Aberdeen. All these draft guys are going to really benefit by being in Frederick and not being in Aberdeen. But it seems like Ike Irish can really express his offensive skill set in a way that's going to actually show up on the stat sheet, and I think that's going to be good for him and good for the Orioles.
When you look at that, catchers out of the draft trying to get more work in behind the plate, we saw this Ethan Anderson last year, and for a lot of the season, Ethan Anderson didn't hit, and then the bat seemed to come alive later in the year. And looking at this more generally, do you think that is a symptom of players trying to learn the rigors of catching the position full time, or is it not really a one-size-fits-all thing? So say Ike Irish catches 80 to 90 games next year, we're not necessarily going to see the bat slump.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's player dependent. Ethan Anderson, it seems like he just wasn't hitting, period, at the beginning of the year. And I mean, the same way that no one hits at the beginning of their Aberdeen careers, basically, except for Jackson Holiday. I think I attribute that more to the Aberdeen of it all, rather than, and also that's a tough league. You face tough pitchers, but I think the general point stands is that it's hard to do both. I think in Ethan Anderson's case, the Orioles believe he improved a lot behind the plate as the year went on, and of course he didn't really catch a lot in college either. There's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of ability to build on based on just by having any kind of experience behind the plate. And I think Ike Irish is going to be in that same boat. You're just going to have to, I think it's incumbent on the player to want to do both and to want to be great at both. I think that's where Samuel Basallo distinguishes himself. Like, yeah, he wants to hit, obviously, like everybody wants to hit, but in the same breath that you hear everyone say he wants to be a great hitter, they will tell you he wants to be a great catcher and puts in that kind of work. Is it a lot of work? Yeah, but like everything is a lot of work. These guys get to the ballpark at like 2 p.m. every day for a 6:30, 7 o'clock game, and they're just doing stuff the whole time. They're working harder before games than they do during them. It's just generally hard. And the separator will be what Ike Irish wants to do and how much work extra he is willing to order off his daily work menu to be a catcher, even on the days that he's not catching. And I think that's doable. And I also think it's easier to do if you are hitting. Everything feels good when you show up to the ballpark and your OPS starts with an 8. Everything feels bad when you show up at the ballpark and your OPS starts with a 6. Even if your expected stats are better, like it will be easier for Ike Irish to do everything that they want him to do pregame defensively if he is hitting. And I think it's just going to, all these guys are just going to end up with better numbers, and Frederick and like the trajectory of people's careers are going to be different.
Now, from one draft pick to another, Irish, you have ahead of Wahiwa Aloy. What are the, the comparisons? What makes Irish clearly, or at least not clearly, but a few steps above Aloy on the list?
Well, I think there's a higher offensive floor with Irish, regardless of where he plays. Like, will the bat be stretched a little bit if he's not a catcher? There's a good chance, but it's not like he's going to be a bad hitter. It just might be a less valuable at first base or in a corner outfield spot where, with Aloy, I think there's legit shortstop defense there, which is obviously a tick in his favor. The Orioles put him on a throwing program, and he's improved his arm drastically even since the draft. That's another plus, especially if he has to move over to third. But it's just the hit tool uncertainty, and I think that is, he is different from those who have come before him, who have been exit velocity monsters, who also have strikeout monsters living under their bed. He is different from all those guys. I'm not going to say his career will go in the same direction, but that's just a real thing. Like that's, and I think that's those are hard improvements to make. And I think that knowledge kind of keeps him where he is. I believe grade wise, they're similar. I'm looking at same grade, a little higher risk because of the strikeouts. They basically say, if you're going to say high risk, you need to have a reason. And for him, it was pretty clear. Like, it's the strikeouts, it's the contact. Irish was the same grade, average risk, because it's just the average. Like, this guy played a month in pro ball, and like, who even knows? That's like your average risk. Like, but I think he impressed the Orioles in a lot of ways. As ever, like you do a lot of sweating about number 10. But I felt most last year I kind of went the opposite direction, where like, well, I felt Griff O'Farrell was kind of a safe person to put at 10. This year it's like, well, who could be number 1 at midseason? Like, and I think out of the candidates that I had, like, Wahiwa can really pop if those contact issues resolve themselves and he's hitting the ball as hard as he does.
Speaking of the 2024 draft class, I want to talk about another player that's not inside the top 10, and that's Vance Honeycutt. Really, really bad first full season. I don't know if you want to give away whether or not you have him in your top 30, but needless to say, it's been a pretty big fall for him since this time last year. Speaking to people around the game, is there a concern that the Vance Honeycutt we saw last year is a sign of things to come?
I mean, it was a topic of conversation for sure. I mean, he's on the list, and he's on the list because there are 4+ tools. He has 4+ tools. He has plus power, plus speed, plus arm, plus defense. Like a lot of people you talk to will say that. You do not have that kind of prowess like with the hit tool, and that undermined his entire season. I made it a point to ask everyone that I talked to what they thought was going on, and you got a lot of different answers. And I don't think any of them were more right or more wrong than the others. I think there was just a lot of stuff going on. there were people that mentioned the swing path and like how grooved it was, basically like where if he got his pitch he was going to hit it, but if he didn't he wasn't. You have people who saw him so kind of out of whack that he's taken like 92-mile-an-hour fastballs down the pipe, and fastball counts because he's not confident in what he's going to see and what he's going to get. You had other people who saw like pitch recognition issues. Some people said it's basically as like it doesn't seem like hand-eye coordination. Anything you might describe somebody striking out 40% of the time over the course of a full minor league season. Anything you might describe that to, I heard, and I give credence to. I think there's like the candle is still in the window, to use the old Dan Duquette word, the term about Pat Connaughton, or like you lose a candle in the window about Vance Honeycutt. I don't think you write that off, because even if it gets to be like a below average hitter, you're talking about somebody who's going to hit for power, somebody who's going to impact the game in a lot of ways. But it seems like this just completely snowballed on him. How much of this was mental? How much of it was physical? How much of it is durable? How much of it is transient? You can't sit here and at this point and say, but you can say that this got away from him fast. There was a time, I talked to the hitting coach for a story, Zach Cole, mid-season, and he talked a lot about how Vance was in the process before he went on the injured list of figuring out what his, like, when are you going to get your swing off? When are you going to attack? When are you going to protect? What are you looking for? When are you going to go into go mode and try to hit the ball hard? And he came back and he did that for a little bit, and then something else happened and it stopped being as good. So it's in there. I don't know how much excavation or adjustment you're going to have to do to get it out, but it was a fascinating topic of conversation. Everybody says keep him alive, and I did. But it's just going to take a lot. And honestly, next year, I'm also not ruling out like the Creed Williams trajectory, where like he'll go back to a place and do really well and then go to the next place, and it'll look like it did last year at the old place, and then it goes back to the new place after an off season to figure out how to combat how pitchers are attacking him and just be on that trajectory. Like I truly think that could be a viable path, but like that's not first round college player. It should move faster than that.
Honestly, not too dissimilar from Judd Fabian. Obviously starting at a much lower place, but I think first things first, get this man out of Aberdeen and into Frederick, and then let's see what happens.
Yeah, and look, if he makes contact with, like, if he's making contact in Frederick, he's going to be, all these guys, if they make contact in Frederick, they're going to be rewarded for it. And it's going to be hard contact if he hits it. We know that.
It's just mind-boggling, honestly, just because like truly one of the more like historic college hitters of the last like decade or two, and to see him hit the wall that hard so early. Hope he turns it around next year for sure. To kind of start to wind down here, I do have like 3 quick hits we can do on some guys not in the top 10. But first of all, I feel like every year in your chat at Baseball America, there's always like a nugget or two that it's like the Brian Windhorst meme. Like, why is he saying that? Like last year was the hey, Sebastian Gongorsto in '97 down there in Sarasota. Perked up on that one. Thought he had an okay year last year, but this year you said I think the Orioles may have something with Brandon Butterworth. What made you say that?
Well, if you look at what I'll pull up his Fangraphs right now. He just turned into like a different kind of hitter after the trade. The Padres system in high A, he walked 7% of the time and struck out 20.7% of the time. And he hit 11 home runs, and that's good. But he just like started walking here and he didn't hit the ball. He didn't have as much power, obviously. Like offensively, the jump from double A or high A to double A didn't go well, but he all of a sudden started walking and stopped striking out, and they unlocked. And it seems like he, from what I understand, he made some like real like swing speed gains in a short time. And like you already have the baseline of being just like the gamer grinder, average ACC infielder type profile. And if he's going to develop those on base skills and not strike out as much and he's swinging harder, which means you hit the ball harder, which means your offensive results improve. Like that is something that is, I think, I don't know if he's like considered the fourth player in that deal, the fifth player in that deal, but other than Eloy, and I'm looking at other stuff as we're doing this, like there's not a lot of infielders. There's Eloy in the top 10, and there's, Aaron Estrada and Joshua Lorenzo down the list. And like, that's really what we're talking about. There's Griffo Farrell. Like there's an avenue for the Orioles to need a Brandon Butterworth if he turns out. I mean, he could turn out like most players who are drafted in the 12th round and signed to minimal bonuses and traded a year into their pro career. Like those guys, that there is a trajectory that goes a certain way for a lot of those guys. But it seems like, if he ends up being more than he was at the time of the trade, those will be the reasons why. It's because all of a sudden the Orioles told him the value of walking and not striking out, and he's going to be able to hit the ball harder, and that would do it,
I mean, they clearly saw something in him because he was told that they specifically targeted him. So
yeah,
yeah,
and like there, yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to find something on a spreadsheet, and obviously you can hear Windows telling me I can't do it. And I'm just gonna stop now. But yeah, it's he's a good player to have in your system. That Padres trade is just broadly interesting. I didn't see a world. I also said in the chat, I don't think there was a lot of there wasn't really a world where Boston Bateman wasn't going to be in the top 10 when I started this process, and like other guys just ended up being higher than him. But like that trade seems like it's going to be one. I don't think the expectation. Okay, I'll say it this way. Whatever the expectations were going to be for like the Manny Machado trade, it's like, oh my gosh, the Orioles got all these guys back. They're all going to be good. Like there feels like more of a likelihood that that's how this trade is going to go, obviously, than how that trade went.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
If you're an HVAC technician and a call comes in, Grainger knows that you need a partner that helps you find the right product, fast and hassle-free. And you know that when the first problem of the day is a clanking blower motor, there's no need to break a sweat. With Grainger's easy-to-use website and product details, you're confident you'll soon have everything humming right along. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You got a $2.5 million arm drafted in the second round, not in the top 10 in this system. It's wild to go back to the start of the conversation there.
And that might be,
still,
that might be wrong. Like that might be wrong, but it might not be. I think that if you put the top 20 names on this list in a hat and pulled out 10, like you'd have to put them in the correct order after you pulled out those 10 names, but I don't think you would have anyone that was undeserving of being like a quote unquote top 10 prospect. And, that's good, I guess. It's bad when you actually have to do it, but it certainly made it easier because you do the top 10. I put it all away. I stopped thinking about it for a while. And then I put off like making the rest of my calls to finish out the top 30, but I'd already talked about like the next 10 guys. So I could just knock out those reports and make my life a little easier.
It really does seem like very quickly from the trade deadline and the draft and just breakout players, we went from a top heavy, you got Beavers and Basayo, and then who knows what, to now it's like, could, a year from now have like be back in that 6 to 8 guys contending for top 100 status again.
Oh, easily. And I think there's also, Esteban Mejia aside, I think, and I think I said it last year in the chat about the Gibson Herman group, but like, if these guys played for like, if these guys were Yankees prospects or Red Sox prospects or like those types of organizations, they would get more national respect. And I think there's a hesitance and there's a lot of stigma attached to being an Orioles pitching prospect, and the bias is to just not really believe in it. So I think that's what people do. But there's been, even just as the person who writes the Orioles chapter of the handbook, there's, and sends it to Baseball America. Like they did a thing recently about like stuff, people who stuck out from the reports they got, and like they're highlighting Michael Ferret based on these reports. They are writing about Levi Wells' fastball. They are having Trey Gibson on their podcast. They are loving up Luis Daly. This is not, Baseball America recognizing Orioles prospect is not like the end all be all, but I think there is a shift, and it is now based on this group pushing itself up to this list. There is a shift towards, people kind of taking this seriously. There's a whole other level to get to. They have to pitch well in the big leagues, but I think there's an understanding that if this group does, then the Orioles are in a much different place for a long time because of it.
Love it. What about pitching? From my own personal, I'd love your opinion since we have you here real quick though, about another guy outside the top 10 there in Thomas Sosa, just because like I go back like a year or so ago, I don't remember when he was on, but we had Anthony Villa on, and something that stuck with me in that conversation was like how his whole demeanor changed when we talked about Sosa, like genuine giddiness almost when we talked to him. We know the immense raw power is there. We know the eye-popping exit velos. Like we know what that ceiling is potentially, but we've also seen like he hasn't put it together yet over the last 2-3 seasons since he's been stateside. But also he gets hurt. The first week was like day 2 of the season, misses a huge chunk of the year. It seemed like right when you get to the point where it's like, okay, you're back, you're settled back in. It's like, okay, go to AA now at 20 years old, and you haven't played all year. Was hoping to see more in the AFL, but like they didn't give him like hardly any playing time there in the AFL. But I think he turns 21 this winter, but he's in AA. Is this just a classic case of like, the baseball card stats weren't great because he's hitting on there in Aberdeen, but the organization was like super pleased with what they were seeing, so they just decided like, hey, this is a guy that we need to give him a huge challenge and send you to AA to close out 2025.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. I mean, that felt early to me too. But I think they know there is value to somebody who they think can handle it, to getting that taste of where they're going to be the next year. So if they're looking at the board and they see that, Vance Honeycutt's probably still going to be in high A, you're going to need a lot of outfield time for a lot of guys. Maybe Sosa's going to be bumped a little prematurely next year. You might as well do it now. He is somebody who is kind of, being 20 in AA is not a small thing. Being that age and being able to move as fast as he did means something. And I think that, he had a pretty good season, like overall fine in Aberdeen. I saw him hit like a big left-on-left home run in one of those games that he did play for Chesapeake in Bowie. So like that type of stuff is in there, but I think this is the type of thing you say about somebody like one of the guys who's on this list who like stunk in Delmarva, where like you keep him alive because there are skills that if the rest of it comes together, those skills are going to be the carrying skill that gets him to the big leagues. But that's the case. Like this guy hits the ball really hard, but it's crude. I don't know if having like to polish your skills is the best thing to say about somebody who isn't AA, who's going to be facing that level of pitching, but nothing is going to force him to do that more than where he's at. So he's somebody who's, pretty firmly in the middle of this list, and for good reason. He's incredibly interesting. He's also young and has the potential to like be an impact corner outfielder, and I think that's a good recipe for somebody his age.
And then last one, Slater DeBrun, just kind of in your conversations with people, and we didn't get to see him at all last year. He's going to make his debut this year. I imagine it's going to be down the FCL, so it might be a little while longer until we actually get eyes on him. But like, what type of player do you think we can expect to see when we finally get to see Slater DeBrun play in the org next year?
It honestly seems like, we're talking about like many draft picks between them and like many millions of dollars in their bank account difference. But like, it seems like if it goes a little Nate Georgie where he's just like hitting the ball over the field and running around and playing good defense, like that would be a great outcome for him and the Orioles. They're really attracted to his ability to control the strike zone, the contact skills. I think they think there's, he's obviously a strong kid. He's like very well built and he wants to get stronger. I think there's, in the same way I was talking about Nate George, like there is just a way of that young baseball players have to learn to move their bodies to hit for power, to, start to express that a little bit more. And I think he's in the process of doing that. So I again, another person, and how many of them can we be talking about at once who like, the Orioles signed this guy for like $4 million and took him really high in the draft. Like that is a top 10 prospect in so many organizations just by virtue of those words. And, I don't think this list is more predicated on performance than potential, but I don't think that, but in saying what I'm about to say, it might make it seem like there's just guys who have proven to be better than him right now. And I'm pretty fascinated to see what it looks like because they have a pretty good history of when they do decide to take a high school player, it's usually worth it.
Can you grade his musicianship on a scale from 20 to 80?
So I saw that he had a single out recently, and I saw this on Instagram, and
Spotify Wrapped #1.
Yeah, no, that's Taylor Swift. You guys know that. I listened. I heard a little of it. I didn't actively listen to it. I decided not to actively listen to it. But it's not because I didn't want to. I heard it and I was like, all right, I get it. And I don't need. I got enough things. As Matt Blood said, when they got asked about it, he's like, I got other stuff going on. But I did hear it. It sounds like he could. He didn't seem like a bad singer. It sounds like he can sing, and like
50 great singing. Okay.
I would be able to. I would not be saying he can sing if he couldn't sing. I'll say that. He can.
Sounds
sing.
like 35 songwriting.
I literally didn't actually actively listen to it. I just heard it and I was like, all right, okay, I'll have to check back in on this.
All right, but
it's honestly so cool that he does that.
No, it is. It really is.
It's really like, and like I would like that as like the Orioles, as somebody who's like, yeah, is it like not what you're being paid a lot of money to do? Yeah, but like, baseball is like, all you have to do is be confident to be a baseball player. Like that is most of it. If you think you can do it, that's most of the deal. Like you need the physical traits, but like this is a confidence game. You have to feel good about yourself like every single day, even when you're not doing well. And like you have to be confident to produce and record your own music. And I think that speaks volumes about him.
He's the 2029 Jose Iglesias World Series song. Okay. But the real final question, we can't go every year. We have to ask this. It's my favorite, maybe my favorite question and answer session of the entire year. A year
One
from
of these
today,
years I'll prepare for it. One of these years I'll prepare for it.
A year from today, what is your Orioles top 5?
I'm going to say the top 5 Orioles prospects this time next year are, man,
I need to remember to look up last year's answer before.
Oh God, no! I don't think I did. I think the Messiah one's going to be an all-timer. I'm never going to do
Yeah,
that.
that was great. That was great.
All right, here we go. I'm going to say it's going to be Nate George 1. It's going to be their first pick, number 2. Then it's still going to be Trey Gibson 3. Then it's going to be Ike Irish. And then it's going to be Michael Ferret.
That's a respectable answer. Nate George number 1 is pretty strong take there. I like it.
I just think that if he does Nate George things for like a full season and like ends in AA,
that's Nate Tuna talk right there.
It's not going to be. There's a certain like gravity. I don't think gravity is the word, or lack of gravity. There's like, once you're in a tier, like it's hard to get out of the tier and like out of that space. Like the grades are the grades. If he has a good season and he's like a 55 average risk and he has a good season and he's 20 years old and in AA and in that mix, like that's just, we've seen what it looks like when you fall off. Like Chase McDermott, Jet Fabian, nowhere to be found. Vance Honeycutt, nowhere to be found. But like, if you have the season you're supposed to and get better and climb the ladder and do the things that are expected of you, you kind of stay in those mixes. I don't think there's a world where Trey Gibson graduates, I guess. Maybe not. If I could do that list 2 minutes ago over again, maybe I put Boston Bateman in there. But I think that it'll still be pitching heavy and I think Michael Ferret's going to jump high because that's still just what I think,
I've loved the Michael Ferret confidence. I feel like it's been like 2 years now. You've been the Michael Ferret, the guy that's high on him the most. And I was looking at what he did after that first IL stint with the back injury, and it was just like no rehab, just go right back into the rotation. And he has like 2-3 inning stints, but it was just like complete dominance from right back then. I know he ended the year on the IL again, and hopefully that will be good next year. Hopefully just some growing pains for the young guy, but. Yeah, that the Michael Ferret could just be like, he seems like either Michael Ferret or Nestor Herman could be like the sneaky guy that fewer people are talking about that just kind of shoots the gap and bypasses everybody.
Yeah, and like if he does if he did have the season that he had this year with 40 more innings, supporting that, you're in the same mix. He's younger than Trey. It feels Trey Gibson-y, just a little. Like age-wise development, age growth, whatever you want to call it, just a little behind that. And if Trey Gibson can be number 3 and like that puts him in the mix as like a top 100 prospect, then Michael Ferret can too.
My hot take is Aaron Estrada will be top 5. Wellington Arcena top 10.
Aaron Estrada is another good one. I mean, I wrote this in the chat, but like every time I went down to Chesapeake to catch all these drafted or traded pitchers and kind of finish out guys I needed to see, he would just do something good. And as it kept going on, I'm like, how high am I going to put this guy? Like, is he in the top 10 mix? And like, I made it a point, I feel like for me, it's a clear delineation line. Like, am I talking to you about guys for the top 10 call, or are you and everyone else call? I'm like, I made it a point to put Aaron Estrada in that top 10 call for everybody, and they're like, yeah, probably not yet, but like you're on the right track. And I think that was encouraging, because you can't watch him play and not enjoy it.
Well, Jon, thank you as always for your insight. And before you wrap up here, let our listeners know what's going on over at the Banner. It's, I know, a busy off season right now. You guys are pumping out a new podcast episode every week, a lot of writing. So tell our listeners what they can look forward to over there.
Yeah, so the whole gang's going to be down at the winter meetings, myself included, my triumphant return to the winter meetings. I'm trying to, I want to make sure there's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on with the new manager. I want to make sure I'm there for that. So we're going to be full court pressing it. We're going to be doing some podcasts from down there. We're like, Andy's doing great stuff. He's plugged in with what the Orioles are doing. We're trying to talk about it as much as possible. I have some cool story ideas that I'm sure you guys will appreciate when you see them. And you'll know what I'm talking about once you read them. I'm really excited for what the next couple weeks he's going to be at the Banner. And I think that's all, just the stuff that we have planned. And that's, not counting the stuff that the Orioles give us to write about, which, as I said, an hour ago, I think is going to be a lot.
Did we get the Bo Bichette signing that was announced earlier in the chat? We get the story on that.
Tomorrow.
Did that happen? Did I miss something?
Luckily,
No.
you did. Yeah.
Just a fun chat.
Was that what crashed my computer?
I don't know who that was who wanted to come in and have some fun in the chat, but it was a lively chat tonight. We'll say that.
Love it.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure. Keep up the good work. I've told you guys a million times. It's not easy doing what you do, and I'm sure it doesn't feel as rewarding as you want it to, but it's very valuable and very, very meaningful to people who follow it. So keep it up.
Thank you. And we will be back next week. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheBirds.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon, sign up, become a member today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Patreon is running gift specials this holiday season. You could sign up a friend or a family member for a Patreon membership for the full year and save 15%. So be sure to check that out. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spenn. You've been listening to Orioles on the Birds, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you're an HVAC technician and a call comes in, Grainger knows that you need a partner that helps you find the right product, fast and hassle-free. And you know that when the first problem of the day is a clanking blower motor, there's no need to break a sweat. With Grainger's easy-to-use website and product details, you're confident you'll soon have everything humming right along. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.